the talk, which I agreed to give weeks ago now, it seems like weeks ago, Vajrapuriya said to me, would you like to do a talk one evening? I said, yes, okay, I will. What will it be about? And he said, the Four Noble Truths. And my heart sank, and it has been sinking ever since. There are several reasons for this. One is there has been so much written and spoken about the Four Noble Truths. And my reservation was, what could I possibly say that hasn't been said before? The other cause for concern was that I think just about everybody who has had any sort of link or contact with the Dharma knows about, if they cannot recite the Four Noble Truths. And I thought, well, everybody knows about it. So what can you say? And that's been exercising my mind for quite a while, up to writing the order of service for this evening, which I obviously got wrong. There we go. I think what I came up with, what I started to think about, was this whole business of translating the Buddha's message into English. And it's something that I become more concerned with. I think it's aging, that you become more fussy about things. You want things to be right. And what I've been coming up against increasingly is a dissatisfaction with the translations of Pali and Sanskrit words that we use. As a result of that, I decided I'd go back and have a look at the Pali words that we use to describe the Four Noble Truths. So that was where I started. I find the difficulty with translations is that we learn them, we hear them, and we stick with them. So I suppose the most common example is if you're reading a Dharma book and you come across the word Dukkha, if you're anything like me, you instantly translate that into English. And the English word that you use is one that you've been using for quite a while. So it's your word of choice to translate Dukkha. And it's probably suffering or unsatisfactoriness, because those, I think, are the two most common ones. And I began to think that it might be advantageous if we started to question the words, the English translations that we use, in the light of our own experience of practicing the Dharma, and see what happens, see what we come up with. So before I started on the Pali words for the Four Noble Truths, I started to think about the phrase, the Four Noble Truths, and what, in fact, does that mean? Why describe it in that way? So I started to think about, first of all, about the word truths or truth. I've been watching our beloved leader today on the news and on his press conference, and I began to think about the way that we address truth in society generally, and it's a bit of a commodity which is negotiable. And how different that is from the Four Noble Truths. So these are truths which were proven to the Buddha's complete satisfaction. And his message to us is, you can prove those to yourself. You can prove the truth of them to your own satisfaction. So the next word was noble. And I looked up what noble was, and it's two of the meanings of noble stood out for me. One was courageous, and the other one was magnificent. And I think both those words are worth bearing in mind, because phrases like Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path, they just trip off the tongue because we're so used to using them without actually considering, perhaps, the importance of the words which are used to describe the Buddha's teachings. So there's a nobility in these teachings, and there is truth. So coming on to the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth of dukkha. And I suppose it's more and more likely that we will read books where the word is not translated, but there are still lots of places where it is. So suffering is the one I mentioned, unsatisfactoriness, affliction, stress, imperfection. All words to describe the pain of human existence, the things which are not as we would like them. So I thought, well, I don't think I'm going to do much explanation in this talk. What I am going to do, I think, is to give lots of questions to you about your practice and just leave you with those questions and see what happens with them. See if they cause you to pause and think, what does this actually mean for me in my lived experience? So how do we translate the word dukkha in our own experience? What does it mean to us? And it may be that we find words that really express for us the feeling tone of dukkha in our experience. So what I'm trying to do, I think, here is one of the things I'm trying to do is to move the Four Noble Truths away from an academic appreciation, more towards a direct physical experience. What does it feel like when dukkha is present? Yeah. Enabling us to have a really clear apprehension of what dukkha means for us. And the next thing I thought was, well, how do we react to dukkha? So do we face it, or do we want to get away from it? So what's our emotional response or our emotional reaction when we experience directly the feeling of dukkha? If we don't like it, if we shrink from it, if we want to flee from it, it's actually quite difficult to consider in what way is that truth noble? Because quite often, I'm thinking of my own experience, when dukkha is strong, it doesn't feel very noble. So maybe worth thinking in your own experience, how can you get a feeling of nobility when you're faced with dukkha? And perhaps one way that we can experience nobility is by facing dukkha, is actually by saying, this is my reality. This is what I am dealing with, and being quite honest about it. So those are my thoughts about dukkha. We come to the second noble truth, samudaya. Samudaya, which is translated as arising or coming up, appearing or response. And the word that's usually used in conjunction with the second noble truth is craving. Yeah? The word that was used, as far as I'm aware, in the sutta was tanha, which is thirst. And I was struck by the contrast between those two words. Craving, for me, is, or can be, quite an intellectual, cerebral exercise or response. Tanha, or trisna in Sanskrit, is, if you like, a body reaction to something. It's something that we can appreciate physically in our bodies. And so that the way that I'm approaching the Four Noble Truths is very much what's happening in here for me. And tanha gives more of a feeling of what dukkha is like. What's my reaction? What's my response to dukkha? What I find interesting is that tanha was one of Mara's daughters. I don't know if you knew, Mara had 3 daughters, tanha, arati, and raga. Thirst, aversion, and desire or passion. So if Mara can't get you, you send one of his daughters, and they'll try and lure you away from the spiritual life, from what you're trying to do, trying to achieve. So it's a thirst for things to be different. Don't want dukkha. I want something different. I want it to be made better. So the next question is, what is our reaction or our response to samudaya, to the arising of thirst in response to dukkha? Do we want to get away from it? Or do we want to face it? So it's fight or flight. And again, that raises the question, so in what way is samudaya noble? How can we see any nobility in something which, again, is quite painful, sometimes physically painful, emotionally, psychologically painful? And how do we feel about samudaya that we experience? Can we accept it? Do we feel ashamed of it? Do we feel that we're not coping, that we're not managing the spiritual life very well? Or can we, again, just accept that this is how we are? We're human beings. This is how we're pre-programmed, if you like. This is what happens to us. We feel thirst. We don't want dukkha. We want it to go away. We want it to be made better. And I'll revisit this a little bit later. So if we come on to the third noble truth, Nirodha. And I've got three translations, possible translations. And the most common one, of course, is cessation. This is the one that we learn. Third noble truth is the cessation of suffering. But it can also mean capturing or containment. If we take the word Nirodha, the last part of it, the last syllable, two syllables, Rodha, means a bank or an obstruction or a prevention. So it has that feel about it for me. It's not about getting rid of, it's about containing. It's something we can do. So in contrast to the first two noble truths, which feel like things that happen to us. Yeah? A situation arises, we feel painful, we feel pain, we feel thirst to get rid of this feeling. We don't want it in our experience. Nirodha means that we actually have something that we can actively do. There is something that we can begin to do, an approach which will help with the experience of dukkha and samudaya. So if we think about containment, it's about capturing that thirst. It's not about squashing it. It's not about doing away with it necessarily. One option is to contain it, not to dwell in the object of that thirst, but to actually capture the thirst. And that requires awareness. In fact, all three of these require awareness. We need to know what's going on. We need to acknowledge what's going on. And then in the third stage, we can begin some form of control of the desire. So that's Nirodha. And of course, the fourth stage, Marga, path or track. So controlling and purifying body, speech, and mind. And I was thinking about my response to the Four Noble Truths. And I suppose most of the time I've concentrated on the fourth. I've concentrated on the Noble Eightfold Path. So again, that word noble. Because although it's difficult, there is a nobility about doing something to try and come to terms with, to try and deal with dukkha, samudaya in a very positive way. So I was trying to find where my response, where my liking for the Four Noble Truths came from. And it came from a book by a man called David Brazier. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He formed the Amida Trust, which is social action in Buddhism. He was also a psychotherapist. So I guess this appealed to me, this idea that there was a psychotherapeutic approach to the Four Noble Truths. Not one that's very popular, perhaps, but one which appealed to me. So I wondered what what our approach to the Four Noble Truths tells us about our approach to the spiritual life. This is the bit I struggled with this morning when I was writing this talk. Because it started to bring up some very awkward questions. And the first question that arose for me was, in leading the spiritual life, are we aiming to be happy or are we aiming to wake up? Earlier this year, we spent some Wednesday evenings looking at awakening. And I think, if I'm honest, a lot of my spiritual life I have spent trying to be happy, rather than thinking about and working at waking up. So I was thinking in terms of the Four Noble Truths. What's my aim? Is my aim to get rid of dukkha in some way? Or is my aim to be able to face reality, to be able to face up to things as they really are, the best way I can? And I think that's work in progress for me. And perhaps you could reflect on how it is for you all. So am I running away from pain? Or am I moving towards an appreciation of the way things really are, of reality? And I think, again, for a lot of my spiritual life, I didn't want the pain. I wanted to run away from the pain. I wanted to get rid of it. So, those were my thoughts. That's what occurred to me on the Four Noble Truths. And then I started thinking about the Heart Sutra, because these talks are being given within the context of the Heart Sutra and this weekend retreat. I mean, I've been doing the sevenfold puja now for 46 years, which means I've been chanting the Heart Sutra for 46 years. And I don't think I got very far with it. 20 years ago, I bought the book by Dr. Edward Conza, Buddhist Wisdom Books, which has got the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra in it. And I would get about 10 pages in, and then my brain would seize with what he was telling me. I don't know if you have tried reading it. It is not an easy read. He was quite an academic. So you start off quite well and you think, oh yes, this is okay. And then it gets harder and harder, or I found it harder and harder to see what he was saying and to actually appreciate what he was saying. So I think it's important to realize that the Heart Sutra is not always amenable to logic and reason. There's so much of it I can do, and then it starts to get a bit problematic, and I tend to give up. So I've been reading other texts which try and explain the Heart Sutra in a different way, and I found those are easier. So there's a book by Red Pine, an American, called The Heart Sutra, which I find more easy to access. I won't say I can understand all of it, but it's easier. I think Thich Nhat Hanh has also done a very small book on the Heart Sutra, which is also easier to understand. So we're looking at what the Heart Sutra is trying to get us to do, because it has a purpose, and its one aim is to get us to wake up. Awakening is its aim. To move us on from the limited view that we have of reality to how things really are. And if you look at the Heart Sutra itself, it's a dialogue or a duologue between Avalokiteshvara and Shariputri. And I don't know if you've looked at who those two characters are. Avalokiteshvara, yes, you're probably all familiar with. Bodhisattva of compassion. So why is it Avalokiteshvara? Is the question. Why is the Bodhisattva of compassion talking within the Heart Sutra, which is about development of wisdom? Why isn't it Manjughosha? Well, from experience, my experience is I need a lot of compassion in not being able to understand what the Heart Sutra is saying. It's hard work. So I do need Avalokiteshvara's help. I think what Avalokiteshvara is saying is, this is not easy. What I'm asking you to give up is all your ideas about what the Dharma is about. No less than that. And if you been to these Wednesday evenings, we've gone through what the Heart Sutra says does not objectively exist. It doesn't not exist, but it doesn't exist. And that's difficult enough for a start. But what it's asking us to do is to let go of what we think we know about the Dharma. So we know about Avalokiteshvara. And what do we know about Shariputri? Well, he was one of the two foremost disciples of the Buddha. And he was well versed in Dharma. And it's generally accepted, I think, that he was responsible for starting the preparation of the Abhidhamma, the ultimate analysis of experience in Dharmic terms. So this was the man who represents, if you like, the Abhidhamma, which I think particularly the Sarvastivadins regarded almost as being real things. They were the ultimate in analysis, and they came to be regarded as the real things. What the Heart Sutra is a message to Shariputra and those people who believe in the reality of the things in the Abhidhamma. He's saying it is not true. So it's quite, no wonder it's difficult, because what Avalokiteshvara is saying, I realize this is difficult for you, but I'm going to ask you to let go of every idea that you've got about how things really are in reality. So good luck for the weekend. So in the Heart Sutra that we've been reciting at the end of these evenings, that there are a couple of lines. Nor is there pain, or cause of pain, or ceasing pain, or noble path to lead from pain. So those are the Four Noble Truths. Yeah. And what it's saying is that the Four Noble Truths are empty of absolute existence. They're true at a certain level. They're true at a mundane level. In other words, that there's something we can work with, as long as we don't think that that's the end. That, you know, this is absolute truth. It's true as far as it goes. And what they're aiming to do, what the Heart Sutra is aiming to do, is to move us on to a level where we can leave those beliefs and those noble truths and the Noble Eightfold Path behind us. Because that's what the Heart Sutra is asking us to do. Now, I don't know what your response is to the Heart Sutra as it's found in the Sevenfold Puja. Mine is that I don't like it a lot. And again, this may be aging, it may be becoming a grumpy old man, and I'm determined not to like something. That may be true, that may be true. But it may also be that I find that there's a better way of approaching the translation of the Heart Sutra. Okay. So to finish this talk, I'm going to read you a translation of the Heart Sutra by Red Pine, which I find is better, for me anyway. And we will be chanting the usual Heart Sutra at the end of the evening. So, the Heart Sutra. The noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, while practicing the deep practice of Prajna Paramita, looked upon the five skandhas, and seeing they were empty of self-existence, said, "Here, Shariputra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not separate from form. Form is not separate from emptiness. Whatever is form is emptiness. Whatever is emptiness is form. The same holds for sensation and perception, memory and consciousness. Here, Shariputra, all dharmas are defined by emptiness, not birth or destruction, purity or defilement, completeness or deficiency. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no memory, and no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no shape, no sound, no smell, no taste, no feeling, and no thought. No element of perception, from eye to conceptual consciousness. No causal link, from ignorance to old age and death. And no end of causal link, from ignorance to old age and death. No suffering, no source, no relief, no path, no knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, without attainment, bodhisattvas take refuge in Prajna Paramita and live without walls of the mind. Without walls of the mind, and thus without fears, they see through delusions and finally nirvana. All Buddhas, past, present, and future, also take refuge in Prajna Paramita and realize unexcelled, perfect enlightenment. You should therefore know the great mantra of Prajna Paramita, the mantra of great magic, the unexcelled mantra the mantra equal to the unequaled, which heals all suffering and is true, not false. The mantra in Prajna Paramita, spoken thus: Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi, swaha.